Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavors of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered, and contribute to the community forum. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our construction tech or weekly global Passive House showcase webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Auckland, New Zealand.
And I'm Zach Semke, coming to you from Seattle, Washington.
How's things going, Zach?
They're going well. I just took a nice walk and reviewed this great interview that we're about to dive into. And so it was kind of a beautiful, crisp fall day for us here in Seattle.
Yeah, we're into spring, and it's feeling like it's going to be a warm summer. I think we've had a bit of a taste of things to come. We had quite a lot of rain on the weekend, but this is pretty much starting to dry out already, and it's hot. It's it's warm, but it feels like it's going to get pretty hot.
Yeah, we actually had a tornado warning yesterday, which was pretty weird. So that's
there's some weird stuff going on. Yeah, and as we record this, I think it's the last day of COP. So by the time this comes out, we should know at least some of the rhetoric that's come out of this year's gathering.
Indeed, all sorts of takes. I'm sure we'll be wading through when this goes live. But
we've got some good conversations with people who are doing some really good work on the ground in the building sector, and another great couple of architects this week doing some really cool stuff with Passive House in Australia. But let's before we jump into that, we've got a few people to thank.
We do. So everything we do at the Accelerator, including this podcast, comes thanks to support from our sponsors. So a big thank you to our founding sponsors: 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxter Ingwe Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minitaire All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification Units, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, RDH Building Science, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Thanks to our champion sponsors, Icon Windows and Doors and SIGA. And thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, or the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority.
Awesome. Thank you to all of those great sponsors, and also to you, our listeners. We'd love it if you want to share this podcast with someone that you think might find it useful. Just get them to subscribe, and you'll have these regular interviews. But also, there's a few more popping up this week. I think still you're going through your catalogue of extra interviews from the conference.
That's right. So I did a whole raft of short interviews at the FIESCon 2021 conference in Tarrytown, New York last month, and we're rolling out one episode every day or so for the next couple of weeks. Probably it's a lot of stuff. It's some fun chats.
All right. Well, let's get into a chat that I had with John Tallis and Julia Thomas. They actually happened to be sitting together. I caught them in their office. John has over 20 years of experience as an architect, including more recently an increasing deep understanding of Passive House in the Australian context. And Julia is a German-born and trained architect, but she's lived in Australia and practiced there since 2003. And they formed a company called our FabHaus, house spelt with a H-A-U-S, in order to join together architectural design with the promise of prefabrication to bring down the cost of housing, but also supply really good quality homes in a really efficient way. So I really love that combination of prefabrication and passive house with the intent of making the whole thing a bit more affordable. They're also looking at some innovations in terms of product supplies into the Australian market, which is, I'd say a little bit dominated by some more traditional types of products, or traditional for the Australian market anyway. And just to note that we do talk about R values, and Zach, you pointed out that 6, when someone says R value of 6, I get quite impressed by that.
Yeah, not so much for me. No, that sounds really low.
So the conversion from a metric R value to a RSI R value, which is the imperial, that will be more common to those of you in North America. What's the conversion there, Zach?
The conversion is 5.5. So you take the metric R value and multiply it by 5.5 to get the imperial R value that we're accustomed to here in the US.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's get into it. Here's my interview with John Tallis and Julia Thomas. If it thinks that someone's waiting, it won't let me record. All right. Well, thank you for joining us and for your time. Really appreciate it. Where are you guys located in the world at the moment?
Currently, we're located in Melbourne, Australia.
Yes, and I am usually in Byron Bay, New South Wales, and due to our current projects, I'm joining John here in Melbourne just to be part of the first startups or the first projects on ground and covering the office.
How have things been in both New South Wales, Victoria? So Byron Bay, kind of pretty right in the heart of, or close to Sydney there, and in Melbourne. How have things been?
From a COVID perspective, the construction industry really hasn't slowed down. It's probably got crazier.
Right.
It's never really been busier. Yes, we've got a whole raft of restrictions placed on us based on, whether we had complete shutdowns last month for 2 weeks, or in fact whether we've got 5 people on site, or those sort of restrictions. Yep. But really, it's just made things crazier. Materials delayed. You got to be more organised, etc.
So the industry was pretty hot already. High demand for housing. Some of those constraints already. So COVID hasn't changed that. In some ways, it's made the delivery a little bit harder, but it hasn't affected demand.
The Australian government also introduced an incentive. So if you had a project worth under $750,000, the Australian government would give you 20, which hasn't really affected us because we're post that phase. Yep. It's overheated the whole market,
right?
And it's probably brought forward some of our ideas and the necessity of our ideas, what we can offer the marketplace. Yep. So better quality housing to a passive house standard at fixed price at a fixed time frame.
Which all sounds great, and I want to get into that. But let's go get a bit of the backstory. So, Julia, you're originally from Germany. Did you train as an architect in Germany?
Yeah, I trained as an architect in Germany over there, and arrived 2003 here in Melbourne, and started as an interior architect, and then just graduated into architecture. And 4 years ago, I met John in the Passive House course. So I got told Passive House. It was part of my education. So I grew up in a sustainable environment. And that was always my passion, and it was really interesting to see the different kind of construction standards here.
Different construction standards. That sounds like you're being very polite there.
And look, my grandfather and my uncle were both architects, and what they told me, and it took me to side, construction is the most important thing. And I didn't want to actually listen. I was more into the design, but now I actually realize how important it is, and actually to make it work, and quality of workmanship. And I was doing my own renovations. I was really interested. I'm thinking, what's happening here? Like I need to trade for every little thing. So, the different standards. Because if you work in offices, design concepts, you're not usually coming out on site. And then I was a project architect for hospitals and so on. And then I decided 2010 to do my registration and being a sole architect, and on the way we meet.
You met at a passive house. It's kind of ironic that you meet at a passive house course in Australia. When you say you were doing passive house and were taught that as part of your architecture training, does that mean that was just those passive house concepts like air tightness, insulation, but you weren't actually a certified passive house designer?
No, not a certified designer, no, because you have to do that in Germany as well. Do the institute, you have to do actually the city exam, but it's part of the education over there. And air tightness is there. In Germany, it's actually really interesting. You have two camps. You have the passive house lovers who actually believe in it.
Right.
And then you have the schools who actually do not believe in it because of, in the early stages of passive house, there were a lot of damages, building damages, and that kind of, like you learn in the process of the product and so on, what works and what not works. So you have really two camps in Germany. And but I think we come a long, long, long way now. I mean, like in the 80s, when you start, you have, as a startup, of course, your kind of difficulties. But that's what it is really. Like even our manufacturer, Steiko, the Passive House Institute in Germany is called the Academic. So you kind of, it's a different type of group over there. So it's not the mess.
But would it be fair to say that even if you aren't doing, if you aren't in that camp of passive house in Germany, the standard training wouldn't be that far away from the standard, because you're still learning about things like air tightness as a standard? Yeah,
absolutely. It's kind of part of it. Like Bill telling me, well, we're doing air tightness anyway. Right. So the status of construction over there and here, and I'm kind of polite. I think it's 20 years kind of different. Now there's a bit of like John kind of knows the difference, and he was always passionate about it. If you're passionate about it, can be the same status what's in Europe and overseas. But if you're not passionate about it, if you're just guided by the BCA, you just do the minimum. It's really up to you.
So what did you really think of Australian houses when you first arrived in Australia?
I was freezing. I was freezing. People say, you come from Germany, it's -20. I'm like, I am. If you turn off the heater, you're freezing. I'm still, adjusting to that. So you have 4 weather conditions a day. And it's much more challenging than over there because, because of the environment. So you have also the temperature difference. One day you have 18 degrees, the next day you can have 40 degrees.
So, And John, you're trained as an architect as well. Where did you learn to become an architect?
Deakin University in Geelong, Victoria. And then I took a pretty traditional path, went and worked for large architectural firms, did roles on a variety of roles on projects, and then became project leaders, and then ended up becoming a partner in the company, and then left that due to it wasn't really the path I wanted to go down.
But isn't that like the end goal? Like you finally make partner, and then And then what? Wasn't the what you had hoped it would be?
Exactly, because you're a very small part in a very large
Right.
wheel. And I really enjoyed, the aspects of architecture, not just the aspects of winning work. I actually
Right.
liked the nitty-gritty of putting things together and working out why. I'd always go on site and spend far too long on site.
Right.
Whereas, I should have been spending more time at lunch, dining clients, and that sort of thing.
So you didn't want to be too involved in running the business, which is getting you off the tools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And domestic architecture, I think, is probably one of the hardest parts of architecture. I've done lots of educational buildings. I've done everything from car parks all the way through to laboratory buildings. But domestic architecture is so personal, and it's so individual to that client, and that process, I think, is really where a lot of architects, love.
I've heard a lot of architects that I've spoken to feel like they are everything from educators through to marriage counsellors as part of their role.
I've done that. Don't worry about that. We've had, but it's interesting. Most clients, although they'll come to you generally with a personal recommendation, etc., most clients you don't really know.
Yeah.
But by the end, you have done marriage counselling, you have done financial counselling, we've done a whole raft of things in between. And at the end of the day, you learn to spend, time with each other, and you actually respect each other.
That's an interesting comparison. I imagine a car park, cars are kind of easy because they're sort of predictable. You know what they're going to do. But humans, far out, they're a whole different ballgame.
Oh, correct. And there's nothing quite like a meeting with a client, generally a couple, we deal with, and one partner likes this and the other partner likes that, and all of a sudden there's silence and they stop talking to each other.
Yeah, like that's some new revelation that they've never talked about apart from in your office.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, no, there's plenty of those. Yeah. There's plenty of those, and I've had clients who, have just stormed out, etc.
Wow.
And nothing because of what I've said or what I've presented. It's just there's obviously something been boiling up inside, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, is everything okay?
Yeah. How did you come across FabHaus?
So I've always been interested in the technical aspects of architecture. I still absolutely love and passionate about design, but I've always been interested in the technical aspects of architecture, how things are put together, moisture management, etc. I've always tried to do energy efficient buildings, passive orientated buildings, etc. I've done a lot of research into thermal mass and so forth. So lots of my houses have been very energy efficient, what I've done, and I've often been quite experimental with them.
Yep.
I'm sure my clients don't want to hear that too much.
Yeah.
But when I came across FabHaus, I suppose I was just intrigued that it was almost verifying what I was thinking, because I could calculate it out. I could actually tell them what their annual energy bill was going to be, and it justified a lot of the arguments I was trying to make.
Right.
And that, to me, I think was really satisfying. Really satisfying. I mean, I think for a lot of architects, FabHaus, the very nature and I'll say that the Germanness of it, it's a bit daunting.
Yeah.
There's there's a lot of worksheets in a PHPP to fill out. But in fact, most of those worksheets really they're common amongst projects that you're doing. They're not, you might change the air handling model.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're fairly simple things to calculate out and make sure that you're on the right track.
How does it work in the practice now with the two of you? Do you both get involved with PHPP, or you both does one of you tend towards that and the other do the drawing?
So that is a great question, Matthew. So we, as a small practice, so we employ 2.5 people. Yeah, so and ourselves, so 4.5 of us. So although some of us have better skill sets than others at certain aspects, we've got a basic understanding of everything. Right. Now, if the PHPP, for example, if we were just doing data entry of areas, where you set up your facades and so forth, I'll get one of the guys in the office to do it. Yeah.
Because just calculating areas and
it still needs to be checked, etc. But I think the real value of something like the PHPP is that you can very quickly change different aspects of it. So we might look at the glazing unit we're using on that particular building, and we might change it 2 or 3 different times as we're changing the size of the window units themselves, or we might have upped the thermal value of the roof, all to get it to reach the right sort of value.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good tool. Do we draw? Of course we draw. My CAD skills are pretty ordinary these days. I can still open up the file and move around in it. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's the office is fun, but it's also like with FabHaus as a startup, we have the architecture firm, Tallis and Thomas. And then this year we're really concentrating on our FabHaus because that's our belief. I think education to the market and get better houses affordable to the Australian market. We just thought we have to focus on this. We are lucky that all the staff except Sam, our student, are passionate about Passive House and they did the course. So there's an understanding, and it is also, because of our passion, I think that's a requirement.
We essentially employ people on that basis. Yeah, if they're not interested, well, we're not interested, sort of thing.
Does that apply to your clients as well? Do they come to you because they're interested, or do you compete with normal, the mainstream and try and convert people to what you're doing?
It's a great question. I think people who are coming for a bespoke, so they're coming to Tallis and Thomas for a bespoke architectural solution. They're coming because generally they've heard about we're into Passive House, etc. And I would have thought that lots of clients would be, if they didn't have any interest whatsoever, it'd be a fairly torrid experience. Yeah. I would have thought, because clients, of course, want to be educated. Clients want to be led, and they want to actually know that they trust their architect to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if you're more concerned about and I say this to a lot of clients, if you're more concerned about the colour of the bench top than an aspect like air tightness, you've come to the wrong place.
Yeah.
The bench top's lovely, it's great, but ultimately what's going to actually make the house the most comfortable is not the bench top, it's actually the air tightness of the house, thermal bridges, the amount of insulation we've got, the quality of the windows, and ultimately the quality of the air inside the house.
Tell us about the vision for FabHaus and the concept of, or the use of, well, I guess there's two themes there. There's prefabrication, but also standardized floor plans.
I suppose it comes out of doing traditional bespoke architecturally designed houses.
Yeah.
And all architects would have the same problem, getting their architecture built.
Yeah.
And there's a number of aspects to that, is finding a builder who, with the skill set, who is able to craft such a building that you've envisaged. The second thing is finding a client who can actually afford it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think cost, and architects have been criticised for many millennia about their costs and potential to not necessarily manage cost in an effective way.
Yeah.
Because we all get carried away. Now, it's not architects getting carried away. I'm talking about the whole process. So the clients, etc., everyone gets carried away because they go on a journey where, they might be looking for slightly too much accommodation. They might actually love, the way we've increased the height of the space, etc., etc. And ultimately, to bring that back to a construction-ready process of procurement, which is very linear and really needs an incredible amount of thought about how that's physically going to get built and therefore how much it's going to cost, is actually a far more difficult process, especially when you're drawing some pretty simple lines on the page. And I think for both of us, the same goes with Passive House. So clients would always say to us, so, we love the idea of Passive House. That's great. So how much is it going to cost? And, you'd run through the basics of how much it would cost. But ultimately, someone had to build it. And currently in Australia, we have a huge shortage on builders anyway. But to find Passive House builders, so I'm not saying certified builders who have done, training, but people who are interested in it, they're very few and far between. Yes. And those builders are actually creating their own, I suppose, price mechanism in the marketplace.
So in terms of your construction method that you've sort of settled on a construction system?
Yeah, yes. we have.
So
we've gone back to the Germans who've been doing it for 25 years. In Europe, over 20% of all houses are prefabricated.
That's pretty significant.
In Australia, it's less than 3.
I think that's a significant thing to emphasise, where a lot of the mainstream in Australia and New Zealand is still either stick frame or metal frame. You're basically bits of material that turn up on site, and then people are putting them together bit by bit, which is very labour intensive, or brick by brick, as the case in some states. Julia, you mentioned Styco as one of the brands. I love Styco. Not a lot of people would have seen that. Is that's one of your materials of choice?
Yes, that's actually our manufacturer, and they started with us, parallel actually doing prefabrication. Before that, they're only like a producer of the materials. And when we approached them,
so I know them as being makers of insulation, like wood fiber insulation.
And that's how I kind of got in contact, and the sales representative for Australia then mentioned to me, because I was researching the product for the manufacturer in Poland, and then he said, well, we're starting up our own prefabrication process. but we're really slow. We're Germans and we are Bavarians. So I'm like, okay. And when I
Very
was
conservative.
over there, that they just started to build the plant. They were not ready, and I'm thinking, okay, but they were really fascinated about our project. So we have a small little hospital, and then the concept about it. And Bernd Runge, who was the chief there, or the production manager, he is so believing in prefabrication, the future, and he thought we are this thinker. We're kind of thinking what will happen in the next 20 years, even in Germany and Europe. And he loved the concept. And it took over a year, just kind of work through some issues detailing. And then we were really, really lucky. And we kind of created a team and now working with each other. But I think it would be really, really difficult if you would not have the German background, because as they are, just even the thinking and the procurement of things made it easier.
So Styco is more than just makers of wood fibre insulation now.
So they basically built a plant, and they're going to build another factory, essentially automating the process. So they essentially build building components, we call them, whether it be a wall section. So it will have an external layer. It'll have the structural makeup of whether it be studs, LVLs, I-beams, etc. It'll have an internal lathing layer, being generally OSB.
Yep.
And then it's backfilled with wood fibre insulation, blown in. And you can order it with breathable membranes on it. You can order it with plasterboard on it. You can order it with anything you like.
Doors and windows?
They don't do windows as such, but they've actually created a street because you've got to think of it like a Ford, production line,
or a Tesla production line. We prefer these days.
Yeah, exactly. So they've actually created a street where they actually will install the windows,
right?
And they'll install them to FabHaus standard with expanding tape if you want it, with airtight tape if you want it, etc.
So the panel rolls off the production line from one shed to another one.
Correct.
And then the windows get put in. And then what, into a shipping container?
And then into a shipping container. So we actually then, it's called the shop planning phase or planning phase. In that phase, you kind of going backwards and forwards, working on IFC. You get the shop drawings passed through. You're checking them, and then it's actually getting packed into the container, and then you know how many containers you have, which then goes onto sea. But just in regards to Styco and manufacturing, is you're limited to their kind of catalog. It's not like, okay, I want now the agate board and Proclimer materials and so on. So they kind of have their partners.
Yep.
And their OSB and their Styco breathable kind of membrane. So it's really like, in that kind of sense, you have to use that German catalog.
Yep.
And that's what you have to select. And that's how we made then the decisions, what we do on site and what we do in the factory.
I mean, the logistics is quite a really interesting process for architects, designers, builders. Logistics is all about minimizing your risk and bringing whatever it is in at the cheapest possible rate. So the reason why we put the windows in, of course it's for quality control, but it's also because we don't want to ship air, because the window void or the fenestration, which would be empty, would cost us, and then we've got to ship the windows separately.
Right. So you may as well fill that hole up with the window.
And we made a decision very, very early on that we were going to go to European windows because there's some good manufacturers of windows in Australia, and I'm sure New Zealand has some too.
Emerging, yep.
But ultimately, there isn't the demand for that level of quality. I mean, we've got a funny story when we were talking to the Germans very early on about what sort of glazing we were interested in.
Right.
And we said, because it's a modular system, etc., we want to standardise lots of the decisions that our clients would make. So we just give them two options. So our primary option would be double glazed, and then we thought we'd have an extraordinary. We'll make it triple glazed.
And what is that, entry level German?
And of course they kept saying, "You mean triple?" was the entry level. But I didn't understand because my their English was pretty bad and my German's pretty bad too. So I kept thinking, what the hell are they talking about? We just want double glazed, and then people are prepared to pay for it. We'll do triple glazed. And they were going, no, John, triple glazed is the standard. And if we have to tool up to do double glazed, it's actually going to be as expensive, or it's going to be more expensive. So don't
even offer it.
Don't change it. We don't offer
it. Yeah.
And we're producing, or we're doing a window system which is PVC, PassiveHaus certified, triple glazed, 48 mil thick, triple glazed unit.
So the IGU is 48
correct.
mil.
48 mil thick.
And so how thick is the whole window frame itself? Is it?
100 mil.
Yeah, wow. Because what's the thickness of your walls generally?
They end up being about 360.
Right, but after you're cladding and everything, because they don't come clad, right? They come with.
No, they don't. Currently, they don't come clad.
Yeah.
So we essentially, after the building is assembled, a pod takes about 2 days to assemble.
Right.
Yeah. And then we wrap that and counterbatten it and then batten it. So we get really good airflow underneath the cladding material.
So, I mean, it's exciting stuff. There's so many questions. I guess what about the pros and cons versus constructing locally versus bringing stuff from the other side of the world? So the plant's in Germany?
No, the plant is actually in Poland. So these days in Europe, the headquarters is in Munich, so you're dealing with Munich. And their production manager kind of go on a weekly basis to their plants in Poland. So all the supply windows from Europe, Belgium, Germany, France, everything is produced actually these days in East Europe.
That's quite typical. That's not.
But do you get pushback from people saying, why are we importing all this material, shipping it halfway around the world when we've got, resources here that we could be building with?
We've talked about that quite a lot. We're probably slightly different to New Zealand. I believe Australia produces less than, I think it's about 20% of all the pine that we use. And you've only got to go to any building site, domestic building site, and you'll have pine from Scandinavia, you'll have pine from Eastern Europe, you'll have pine. Of course, you'll have Australian pine there, but when you order your pine, you order a pack of 90 by 45 MGP 10. You don't ask where it came from. You just ask for the most economic price for that's available at the time. And, I suppose from our perspective, Australia imports a lot of building materials, an extraordinary amount of building materials.
85% actually. 85% of building materials comes from overseas.
And so our feeling is if we are actually using the prefabricated process to use those materials as efficiently as possible, so that the more prefabrication you do, the less waste you're going to do, the higher the quality you're going to be, the less undoing stuff and redoing it, etc. Because it's been a better planned or a better thought through process. We're probably using materials more efficiently.
Have you done a deeper analysis on that, like a carbon analysis or a life cycle analysis, comparing local production versus all those things that you mentioned, which I can see the benefits of that, the scale, the less waste, more efficient use of all those materials?
I think when we kind of started, we looked into that because, locally, and the cost didn't stack up.
Yeah.
To start on the market and to have a product, like for the product. So we kind of thought, let's kind of go this way. Yes, we want to kind of come here to the Australian market. We would like to make it happen. Yeah. So therefore, yes, we have done the analysis, but we're still kind of working through that as well. And but really at the beginning, it was the numbers.
Yep.
We have some local providers for this prefab system, but it doesn't stack up.
I think until we get a really good handle on the procurement side of the business, and in an emerging, remember we've done 2 FabHouses. So the first one was the whole team had never seen it before.
Yeah.
Now I'd seen it. I'd seen it on drawings. I'd seen some photographs of the production line, but because of COVID, we weren't even able to go and visit the production line.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we had never seen any of it. So
that's a pretty big leap of faith.
Well, you can imagine my surprise when we pulled off the first tarp off the first shipping container. Having worked absolutely flat out solid on this project for 12 or 18 months, to open up and see some wood fibre stacked in the corner of the container, thinking, right, so what are we going to do now? But ultimately, we incorporated a really good team of people who were interested in assembling. So they are experts at rigging, experts at craneage, that sort of thing. And we're assembling these things basically with screws. Yep. So you're taking what is traditionally a carpenter's role and it becomes almost mechanical.
Yeah.
Because everything fits together and screws together. And you've got to know pretty quickly your tolerances on what is an acceptable tolerance. The Germans will say their tolerance is 4 millimeters. So it's 4 millimeters between each panel, between each element or component. In Australia, we've probably never heard of 4 millimeters. We're probably talking 44 millimeters.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's about finding that middle ground and working out what is time effective, and then what is a level of precision that perhaps we've never experienced as a skill set.
Yeah.
But then there's also other issues. Our containers sit on the water for 60 days. Wood takes up moisture. And because it's travelling halfway around the world, wood will actually grow in the container. And, it was out of my understanding until we actually started pulling pieces out and going, oh, right. So 90 mil is actually 93 mil.
Yeah, right. Because they've come through the tropics to get to you and gone through every climate zone in between.
Correct. And we're using an open top container.
Right.
And ultimately some of those some of those details, which had zero tolerance, didn't work quite as well as we thought they might.
Yeah.
So, you know, for a day or two, I think the Germans had a bad name, but ultimately, we've come round, and it's about understanding the whole process and then linking that back into the design and the shop drawing. And we changed a couple of those details, and we're finding it. No problems at all. And the experience with FabHaus 2 is we assembled FabHaus 2 in 2 days to a much better tolerance, which meant that the overcladding only took 2 weeks. So the building is fully flashed, roofed, weatherboarded and finished on the outside in 2 weeks.
Which in your locations would be between rain showers. Often.
Exactly. Exactly.
Just keep it nice and dry.
It's an interesting aspect to it, the rain, because the buildings are, as soon as they're assembled, they're essentially dry. So even though they're not clad or have got their rain jacket on, they're actually quite dry. So,
but I'm guessing you don't want to let OSB get wet if you can avoid it.
Well, it'll handle a bit of moisture, but not months and months of moisture.
Yeah.
You can actually have the FabHaus base build up to 3 months kind of standing outside. And so in Poland in winter because the client couldn't decide what kind of cladding he wants. And because of the wood fiber, it's just kind of trying out. But you kind of want to actually limit that to
But it actually means that you can start working on the inside of the building as well as the out. Yeah. So, you know, you could have, on a typical module, we could have 2 carpentry teams working on the outside and a carpentry team working on the inside, finishing up ready for plaster and rough-in. Your building's ready for plastering in 3 weeks.
Hey, look, it's really exciting stuff. Couple of quick fire questions just to wrap up. Does the changing to a prefabricated, you're sort of constrained by what the modules available are? Does that constrain your artistic creativity as an architect, and does it constrain the preferences of your client?
So we design the module.
Mm-hmm.
So the dimensions or the dimensionality or the system has actually been designed by us. And we took I suppose as architects, we thought, how do we actually make a modular system suit a whole variety of sites?
Yep.
Now you're not going to put one of our modules down on a very inner city site.
Right, sure.
It's not going to work because we've got a whole raft of other town planning requirements and so forth. But we've actually built a space, if you like, based on what we think is actually great volume of space and a nice place to be from an architectural perspective, but also taking advantage of the system that we're using. So because we're a flat packed system, now as long as the components themselves fit in a 40-foot container, we're not restricted to how big that volume is. So our ceiling heights are a vaulted clerestory, so they're up to 4.1 meters high, and you know, so we've actually got really good volume of space. And we looked at that as not only from an architectural perspective as what we wanted, but it's how to differentiate ourselves in the market, because our competitors, because they're completely assembled and virtually finished, our competitors have to fit on the back of a truck and need to fit down the road and need to be able to be craned in through the trees and so forth of that particular site.
The beauty of the system is that you can go up to 5-story high.
5 stories.
5-story high. always offer, like, if you want to have a custom design architecture, Tallis and Thomas doing the design, we can do that. We can do all kind of angles. But just for FabHaus, we start with this module. It's kind of adaptable. And yes, the aim is, that's what we would like to see is, yes, we have an urban dwelling. We have a kind of a catalog of range of kind of FabHauses. But this is the style.
But one of the key things that we wanted to do right from the start was take out all the inefficiency of the building industry. Yeah. So currently, the building industry aren't particularly good at reading drawings. They charge like it, subcontractors, and they'll do every job differently, whether it's different or not. And in bespoke architecture, I think as soon as they realise that it's architecturally designed house, then the price goes up, and they're happy to spend 5 days on site where it should have taken 3 days to rough in and so forth. And what we wanted to do was to say, well, okay, let's do standard ways of doing it. So we actually get better buying power from, doesn't matter whether it's our HRV supplier, it doesn't matter whether it's our flooring supplier, whoever it is, we do standard ways of doing it.
So what's the end result been for price?
So we think that these aren't cheap houses. There's no question about it. They're still super highly spec'd, triple glazed. We've got R values in the wall of 8.4, roofs 8.7, floors 4. So they're highly, highly spec'd houses, but they're much cheaper than, the bespoke route or even the modular competitors.
Yeah.
So, they'll range from about 4,500 a square metre up to a little over 5,000 a square metre.
So it's not fair to compare them with a large group home builder who's just building standard compliant houses.
Absolutely not.
You're more comparing with a really high, and probably not even just a high, because high end doesn't mean high performance. You really need to. It's a whole different comparison, really, isn't it? What you're comparing with.
Correct. And we've looked at our target market, and our target market is very interested in architecture, is very interested in performance,
right?
Is very interested in quality, but they probably don't want the architectural process. It's a long, and and it's very energy consuming,
which means expensive
for most people or most couples, which means that it takes longer, etc.
Now, just finally, consenting permissions. Any issues with getting something consented and approved that's built in Poland?
There are no issues because the structural system is actually designed here in Australia to Australian standards. The Germans will sometimes beg to differ on our standards versus theirs because they'll think theirs is better. It certainly is. We're using a whole system, right? So although there's sticks of LVL or building elements that have a spanning table and are rated to a certain load, etc. But in fact, they're all screwed together to create an actual system which our structural engineer certifies at the end of the day. But ultimately, they're put together with screws. And how they're assembled is technically thought through. Yeah. So each screw position, it might be the angle of the screw, it might be the length of the screw, etc., is all highly engineered, and you're actually going to get a much better outcome than a local carpenter who said, "Oh, gee whiz, I put 3 70 mil nails in it.
Yeah.
That's good enough,
Yeah.
isn't it? And no one's going to check that because.
So we
Whereas what we
understand
do
that
is-
you understand it. Your engineers and Styco engineers understand it. But have you had any trouble with local authorities understanding that, getting building permission, any consenting?
No.
They haven't. Have you had to provide any evidence of what's going on in the factory or anything like that?
We are really lucky because we were working with a building surveyor as part of our team, and he's taking Australia-wide us on, and he was part from the beginning
Right.
in there. So he's with all the materials, and we kind of seeing FabHaus as a product. So he's kind of certifying. He's giving us the planning permit, the building permit, and he sees it as a product as well. So we just had him part of the journey, so we don't have any problems in regards to authorities.
Awesome. And then I guess all your services, all of the electrical stuff, all the plumbing, that's just standard on the goes on the inside anyway. So no issues with any of that.
Pretty much. The beauty about the prefabrication process is that we can start to define those things incredibly well. So, we can put penetrations in the prefabricated elements back in the factory.
Yeah, if you know it, yeah.
I mean, it's much easier to do it in the factory as they're assembling the panel than it is to do it on site.
Right. Yes.
When they normally would. It takes, a tenth the amount of time and the cost is reflected that way.
Awesome.
So it's about getting all of those things, aligned and working well together.
Very exciting stuff. Where to from here? Where would you like to see things go in the next, say, 5 years?
We're hoping you order one, Matthew.
In fact, I'd love to order, 10, 20.
We'd like to branch out into New Zealand. No,
We need. I tell you what, we need some MIQ facilities. We need. We should be setting up a quarantine facility out in the paddock somewhere, and then when we're done with that, we can just.
You can have one of ours. You can have one of ours. We would like to continue because we've only started the procurement journey. We'd like to continue that. We've got a whole raft of new clients coming on. We're in the design process for a house in Broome at the moment. These are FabHaus.
For those that don't know, Broome's a long way away from pretty much anywhere. Yeah,
correct. A long way.
Long way.
Look it up on Google Maps. Yeah.
But ultimately, it's about getting some reach so that we're satisfying our clients with a turnkey solution that they're going to be extremely happy with. And if we produce 10 houses next year or 20 houses next year, that's fantastic.
With everything from you've got a 60 square metre mini pod up to potentially 5-story building, you've got a pretty big range of options there.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Correct.
Hey, well, thank you for your time today, and I think it's really exciting stuff. I really take my hat off to the challenges. I know it's not easy. It sounds easy after the fact, but you have taken a bit of a leap of faith to get it all. I must have been a little bit nervous opening that first shipping container and seeing what's inside after all that investment and energy put into that. But I can see a lot of benefits to this for the market down here. So hope it goes well. We'll keep in touch and keep up the good work.
Oh, thank you. And hopefully one day we see you up here and
come and stay for the weekend.
Yeah, once these borders open again, and I also love the fact that on your timeline of build, on your website that you show the last bit is the house party, the opening of each dwelling. So I hope wish you many, many more house parties in the future.
Thank you so much, Matthew.
Tremendous. Thank you.
Awesome.
Cheers.
And that was John Tallis and Julia Thomas of Our FabHaus. They've got a really easy to navigate website and a couple of videos and some really good diagrams on there. Just check them out, ourfabhaus.com. And that's house spelt with the Haus. What did you take out of that one, Zach?
I'm just excited to hear about another example of a firm working to crack this nut, I think that as we have more and more innovators involved in figuring out how to make prefab passive house work, we're going to get better and better solutions, and I think there's a lot of upside there. I just had the conversation that we shared, the interview with Tessa Bradley and Graham Irwin from the FIASCon conference, and Tessa had some great insights about the value of prefab in her delivery process of passive house here in the Pacific Northwest. And we also heard recently from Ron Beatty of Beatty Passive House in England about his T-Cozy approach to retrofits.
And also got to do a full episode with Ron.
Yeah, definitely. Really, he's really inspiring stuff. And so, we had a big behemoth attempt to revolutionize construction here in the US, and they went down. It all fell apart. But what we're seeing is that these smaller players are succeeding in finding solutions that can pencil. And I think with every time they do this, they're going to get better and better at it. So it's heartening and exciting stuff. We didn't really talk about it in this one too much, but I think what we need to do is separate the idea of prefab and standardization from customization, and the fact that you can have customizable standardization or customizable mass production of a really good quality design. And the example I use is if you look at a car park, there's hardly any car. You're lucky to find two cars that look the same, and yet there is a finite number of car models available. So, we have customization available in other manufactured products, and we would do well to think of houses as a well-designed, then possibly prototyped, but then a manufactured product, instead of treating every single house as its own prototype, which is kind of the way that we do it, particularly in the architectural world, where an architect likes to create something brand new every time they do a house for a client. Great point. And I think what we're also getting at is the challenge of taking all this stuff to scale. And another really fun conversation that I had recently was with James Gepner of NYSERDA, and he is just a very insightful person, and was saying that the term product is another way of saying scale. Because, right. Yeah. And so I think that what we heard in this interview was about a customizable product. Perhaps, I think that's the direction. I think that's the direction that they're going, and it's that scale that I think is we all get so excited about, because that's what we need to see. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we've got a 40,000 house shortage in New Zealand at the moment, and we've only got 5.5 million people. So that's a big chunk of people who, and we're about to probably have a whole bunch more people want to come home as soon as they can. So it's not just about people wanting to take the opportunity to make some money off developing houses. We actually have not enough houses. So, and I know that we're not the only place in the world. I mentioned it before, but definitely do check out the website, because they have some example floor plans, what they call the Fab Mini, and then the Fab 1, the Fab 2, the Fab 3, and beyond. So definitely worth looking at. our FabHaus.com to see what they've got there. The other thing we did talk about was products, materials, and that is another big constraint for us in other parts of the sector, things like windows, timber supply, but insulation. I've been really excited about wood fiber insulation for quite a while because it makes a lot of sense. But I also understand that it's one of those things that has quite a big setup cost. You can't just open the doors on a wood fiber insulation factory. It's quite a big chunk of money to invest to set that up and get the whole process, and then break into the market that has all the incumbents there. But there's a lot of good things about wood fiber insulation and wood fiber products as well, from looser insulation to denser boards and so on. So I know that the pathway to get those products into new markets initially probably is to import them, but it would be great to explore opportunities for people to set up manufacturing plants with that IP more close to where it's going to be used.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of clamoring for that in North America as well. We've got lots of trees over here.
Yep. Yeah, totally. And it doesn't make sense to be shipping containers. I mean, insulation is a stupid thing to be shipping around the world because it's about trapping air. So you've got a lot of shipping containers full of trapped air.
Very light stuff.
Yeah. Anything else from you out of that one?
I don't think so. I mean, it'll be fun to see number 3 and number 4 and number 5 and number 50 from these guys.
Definitely. And every time I interview some people doing some cool stuff like this in Australia, I think, when are you going to come to New Zealand? So hopefully soon. All right. It's getting towards end of the year. I think we're not that far away, 6 weeks away from Christmas, which is super scary, but also super exciting if you happen to be under 12.
I've got a couple of those. They're pretty excited.
What do we got coming up?
Well, this week on Construction Tech Tuesday, we have a Philly green roof solar tour. So Philly, Philadelphia. This is looking at the PV array at the Onion Flats Belfield townhome. So Onion Flats is this really cool passive house multifamily project developed and built by Tim McDonald. Belfield Townhomes is a really cool project. The company is Onion Flats, I misspoke, and that's Tim McDonald's firm. So really cool project, and looking forward to hearing about the details of that. And then on Wednesday, we have a special showcase. This is going to be at the European friendly time. So we're doing this one at 7 p.m. in London, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on on Wednesday, which I think is a horrible time for New Zealand and Australia. So my apologies. But once a month we do.
Someone's got to miss out.
Yeah. So once a month we do this, and we're going to be hearing from two inspiring practitioners from the firm Grupo Lobe, which is a Spanish architecture and delivery firm, and they've done more passive house units than any other company in Spain.
Wow.
Over, I think, 1,100 passive house units.
Wow. So
they're going to be sharing their delivery method and kind of go-to design solutions. It's really inspiring.
But those, along with all the other content, will be available afterwards.
Yeah, right? Definitely.
So,
right. All these events we always record them and have a video of both the you can do the presentation only video or the full event archive as well. If you're
it's all there on
lots of Q&A.
Passive House Accelerator. So we don't have to get up in the middle of the night if we don't want to.
That's right.
On
demand
in this part of the world.
Yeah,
we can watch it while we're pretending to work from home in our bubbles.
Exactly. And then on Thursday, so Friday your time, we go back to the UK and Ireland. So this is episode 2 of our Building Performance Interactive series. That'll happen on Thursday, November 18th at 2 p.m. GMT, 9 a.m. Eastern time. And it's going to be focused on modern methods of construction, specifically off-site timber frame construction from start to finish. And we'll be visiting the timber frame facility of KTF Timber Frame for that episode. Lots of other stuff going on, of course, and we'll include links in the show notes.
I just want to do a shout out as well for the COP26 virtual pavilion, which by the time you're hearing this, COP will have finished. But the virtual pavilion, I think, should still be around, and there's some Passive House presence there, not least of which is one of the projects that I'm helping out a little bit on. Here in New Zealand, here in Auckland,
nice.
with it, which is a social housing passive house project, which is super, super exciting. We need to get someone on the show at some point to talk about that. But check them out. There's some cool stuff there, and it's good to see the building industry, architecture, design be a prominent feature of some of the solutions being presented at COP this time around.
Excellent. That's exciting.
Cool. I think that does us. Was there anything else?
No, I've shared what I need to share.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for that. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter and you want to a rundown of all those events and other activities, then definitely head over to the Passive House Accelerator website. Sign up for the newsletter there so you don't miss out on anything coming up and some of the interesting stuff happening all around the world, all flavors of Passive House. It's a great way to keep in touch. Thank you very much for listening in. Thank you, Zach, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Matthew.